Hi, welcome to Feed Your Soul. I am Melinda, and you are watching our series on the Torah portions. The series is designed with followers of Jesus in mind. If you are a Christian, Catholic, Messianic, Protestant, no matter what category you find yourself in, these videos are to help us understand the front of our Bibles better than we do. You can't understand the back of the book without understanding its foundation. So we are in the book of Numbers. These portions are divided up to help us get through the first 5 books of the Bible in a year. We are in Numbers 13 through 15 this week. That portion is entitled Shalach. And Shalach means send out in Hebrew. Each of these portions are titled after the first significant words in that section. And we are also going to look at Joshua chapter 2 and Hebrews chapter 3. We just can't get away from the book of Hebrews. We've done it several times in this study. If you're new to the channel, please go and find the Torah study playlist where you can start from the beginning in Genesis to verse by verse, chapter by chapter, go through what really is the foundation of what our entire New Testament is written upon. Okay, so let's get started. Numbers 13. Yehovah spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out in the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, everyone a chief among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of Yehovah, all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel. And these were their names: from the tribe of Reuben, Shemua, the son of Zechar; from the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, the son of Hori; from the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Jephunneh; from the tribe of Issachar, Igal, the son of Joseph; from the tribe of Ephraim, Hushai, the son of Nun; from the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, the son of Raphu; from the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, the son of Sodi; from the tribe of Joseph, that is the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Susi; from the tribe of Dan, Amiel, the son of Gemali; from the tribe of Asher, Sethur, the son of Michael; from the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, the son of Vasfi; from the tribe of Gad, Guiel, the son of Machai. These were the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua. So before we go any further in this chapter, in this section, we need to pause here and just talk about the significance of that last verse. And Moshe, called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua, or Yehoshua in Hebrew. So last portion, we did discuss the connections between Joshua's name and Jesus's name. And it really fits very well here as well. We talked about it last portion because the prophet portion talked about Joshua, or Yehoshua, the high priest. Here we're talking about a different Yehoshua, Joshua, the son of Nun. Joshua here becomes a very prominent figure in Israel's history as we end the Torah and begin. He gets his own book, the book of Joshua. He is who winds up taking Moses's place, spoiler alert, when they go into the promised land. This change of Joshua's name, Hoshea's name, into Joshua is significant. Hosea means save, savior. It's from the Hebrew word yasha, for salvation or saves. So it's like he saves or just salvation. We have a book in the Bible also, a minor prophet called Hosea, and really salvation is the theme of that book. Joshua becomes Joshua, right? Here, Moses calls Hosea salvation, Yehoshua, which means Yehovah saves, or Yehovah is salvation. And the significance here is isn't small. And so that's why I wanted to just pause with just this one verse in mind. Yehoshua is the one who will wind up leading Israel into the promised land. It's not just that they will receive salvation. What is important here is who is giving this saving grace. And the name Yehoshua is connected to Jesus's name linguistically. By the time Jesus is born in a first century ancient Roman conquered land, Yehoshua has been kind of shortened to Yeshua. And then we have this whole linguistic transliteration issue that gets from Yeshua to Jesus. And that's all it is a translation and a transliteration issue. But if our Bibles were a little bit better at kind of keeping connected things connected, Jesus would be really translated as Joshua or something similar. These names are connected. These names mean the same thing. And Jesus or Joshua means God. Yehovah is our salvation. So you can see over here, we just put, it's from the word, literally, Yehoshua is from the word Yehovah, God's proper name, and Yasha, meaning salvation. So it's just a mashup of those two words. It's awesome. I get excited every time I read this portion because it's just not by accident that it has to be Joshua who winds up rising into this leadership position. There's all kinds of beautiful, prophetic, future pointing, messianic language all throughout the Word of God. And sometimes we miss it if we don't have an understanding of the language, at least a basic understanding of the language the Bible was written in. Okay, so back to our regularly scheduled portion. Verse 17, Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go into the Negev, go up into the hill country and see what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether there are few or many, and whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob, near Lebo Hamath. They went up to the Negev, and came to Hebron. Ahiman, Seshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And they came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. They also brought some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the valley of Eshcol because of the cluster that the people of Israel cut down there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. And then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So this is really a turning point in the narrative here. We'll see together that from here moving forward, um, there's a shift. God has been guiding these people out of the land of slavery, right? The land of Egypt, trying to get Egypt out of them. And at this point, this lack of faith, this lack of belief, which translates into lack of obedience, is something that clearly, by the events that unfold after this, is something that is going to need to die with this generation. And this stirs up a whole lot of thoughts in me. The extent of which the disbelief and kind of rebellion that is going on here isn't all the way evident until you match this passage with the parallel one in Deuteronomy. So Numbers will wrap up when we get to the end of this book, and then Deuteronomy begins. And Deuteronomy is really a retelling of the previous books, the telling to the new generation who is about to go into the promised land, the reminding of them what has happened. And so the retelling of this story in the first chapter of Deuteronomy gives us a little detail that the men had approached Moses to ask about spying out the land. This was not Moses's idea. This was not God's idea. God said, go in to the land that I am going to give you. The people said, well, let us go check and see first, right? And specifically, I don't have a slide for it, but I have it here. Moses is talking. Then all of you came near me and said, let us send men before us that they may explore the land for us and bring us word again of the way by which we must go up and the cities into which we shall come. The thing seemed good to me, and I took 12 men from you, one from each tribe. And they turned and went up into the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol and spied it out. And they took in their hands some of the fruit of the land and brought it back down to us and brought us word again and said, it is a good land that Jehovah our God is giving us. But you would not go up. You rebelled against the command of Jehovah your God. You murmured in your tents and said, because Jehovah hated us, he brought us out to this land of Egypt to give us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us. And it just goes on to say that they chose fear and doubt and disbelief, and that colored their actions. So they were disobedient. So that little detail just adds a little insight into the hearts of many of the men of this generation, that they were afraid and that they wanted to go see, oh, is it truly a good land? Is it truly going to be okay? It wasn't, oh, God says, God has provided for us all this time out here in the wilderness. He freed us. He's fed us. He's shown us grace. He's dwelt among us. He's led us. He's protected us. But yet he may not lead us into the land as he has promised. So we're going to really stick to that theme in this portion and look at the connection between faith, belief, and obedience. Okay, Numbers 14. We'll get the details to the doubting. Then the whole congregation lifted up their voices and cried out, and that night the people wept, and all the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, if we had only died in the land of Egypt, or if we had only died in this wilderness, why is Jehovah bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and children will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? Now, I know a few of our translations don't translate that well. This is a legitimate concern, right? Our wives and children will become plunder. This isn't just like we should just die here instead of dying trying to go into the land. It sounds like they were truly worried about their wives and children becoming slaves to a foreign people. So they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell face downward before the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to the whole congregation of Israel, "The land we passed through and explored is an exceedingly good land. If Jehovah delights in us, he will bring us into this land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against Jehovah, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, for they will be like bread for us. Their protection has been removed, and Jehovah is with us. Do not be afraid of them." But the whole congregation threatened to stone Joshua and Caleb. And then the glory of Jehovah appeared to the Israelites at the tent of meeting. And Jehovah said to Moses, "How long will this people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe me despite all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them with a plague and destroy them, and I will make you into a nation greater and mightier than they are." But Moshe said to Jehovah, "The Egyptians will hear of it, for by your strength you brought this people from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of the land. They have already heard that you, O Jehovah, are in the midst of these people, that you, O Jehovah, have been seen face to face, that your cloud stands over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. If you kill these people as one man, the nations who have heard of your fame will say, because Jehovah was unable to bring this people into the land he swore to give them, he has slaughtered them in the wilderness. So now I pray, may the power of my Lord be magnified, just as you have declared. Jehovah is slow to anger, abounding in love and devotion, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Yet he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished. He will visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. Pardon, I pray, the iniquity of these people in keeping with the greatness of your loving devotion, just as you have forgiven them ever since they left Egypt. I have pardoned them as you requested, Jehovah replied. Yet as surely as I live, and as surely as the whole earth is filled with the glory of Jehovah, not one of the men who have seen my glory and the signs I've performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, yet have tested me and disobeyed me these 10 times, not one will ever see the land that I swore to give their fathers. None of those who have treated me with contempt will see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and has followed me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he has entered, and his descendants will inherit it. Now, since the Amalekites and the Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and head for the wilderness along the route to the Red Sea." Then Jehovah said to Moses and Aaron, "How long will this wicked congregation grumble against me? I have heard the complaints that the Israelites are making against me. So tell them, surely as I live, declares Jehovah, I will do exactly as I heard you say. Your bodies will fall in the wilderness. All who were numbered in the census, everyone 20 years of age or older, because you have grumbled against me. Surely none of you will enter the land in which I swore to settle you, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. But I will bring your children, whom you said would become plunder, into the land you have rejected, and they will enjoy it. As for you, however, your bodies will fall in the wilderness. Your children will be shepherds in the wilderness for 40 years, and they will suffer for your unfaithfulness until the last of your bodies lay in the wilderness. In keeping with the 40 days you spied out the land, you shall bear your guilt 40 years, a year for each day, and you will experience my alienation. I, Jehovah, have spoken, and I will surely do these things to this entire wicked congregation, which has conspired against me. They will meet their end in the wilderness, and there they will die. So the men Moses had sent out to spy the land, who had returned and made the whole congregation grumble against him by bringing out a bad report about the land, those men who had brought out the bad report about the land were struck down by a plague before Jehovah. Of those men who had gone to spy out the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh remained alive. And when Moses relayed these words to the Israelites, the people mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they got up and went toward the ridge of the hill country. We have indeed sinned, they said, but we will go to the place Jehovah had promised. But Moses said, why are you transgressing the commandment of Jehovah? This will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you be struck down by your enemies, because Jehovah is not among you. For there the Amalekites and the Canaanites will face you, and you will fall by their sword. Because you have turned away from Jehovah, he will not be with you. But they dared to go up to the ridge of the hill country, though neither Moses nor the ark of the covenant of Jehovah moved from the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that part of the hill country came down, attacked them, and routed them all the way to Hormah. It's a sad section of scripture. It shows God's justice. It shows that there is consequence when a people, especially a whole nation, a people as a whole, are choosing to turn away from trusting in our Creator. It really gives me pause to think about how many generations have had to fall away because, as a whole, they've refused to turn and listen and obey Jehovah. It reminds me a little bit of a saying that I think I've mentioned on here before, but how our ceiling becomes their floor, right? The ceiling of our generation, the generation of the adults, the people who are of age, the people who are making the decisions and running the economy and running the countries. We can make progress, and we do, and many generations do make progress. But our ceiling becomes the floor of the next generation. And that it just applies to so many things. You know, when we look back at, if I'm talking about the United States, we look back on this country's history, the progress that has been made in democracy, having a government run by the people, the progress that has been made in relationships with other cultures and races, right? The abolition of slavery and giving women equal rights, like in voting and owning property. These things were such a slow, some of them were so slow to become real progress. Like women, for instance, couldn't get their own business loan without a man co-signing until I think the 1980s. It's absurd, right? But we find it absurd now. Our generation finds it absurd. The generation that comes after me, you know, my children, they can't even fathom, what do you mean a man and a woman didn't have the same economic rights just a few years ago? Sometimes it's that the current generation is just so, they've hit their ceiling. I think that's really the best way to talk about it. Like their growth is finite. It's not unlimited. And I feel like that's both sobering and encouraging, even, that God knows we have a certain amount of growth that each generation can handle. And if we don't finish the work, this is the part that's both sobering and hopeful. The next generation gets to pick it up where we left off, right? So what do we want to leave undone for the next generation to come in and have to finish our work? What can we continue to work towards? Can we raise that ceiling, the ceiling of our faith? And I wonder, how many more generations does God have to say, no, none of you are going to come into the land, only your children, right? How many more generations? I don't know. There's work to be done. There's faith that needs to be grown. There's a whole generation of people who need to be brought up in the ways of Jehovah. It's inspiring and a little frightening. All right, Numbers 15. Then Jehovah said to Moses, Speak to the Israelites and tell them, after you enter the land that I am giving you as a home, and you present an offering made by fire to Jehovah from the herd or flock to produce a pleasing aroma to Jehovah, either a burnt offering or a sacrifice for a special vow or a free will offering or appointed feast, then the one presenting his offering to Jehovah shall present a grain offering of a tenth of an ephah of fine flour mixed with a quarter hin of olive oil. With the burnt offering or sacrifice of each lamb, you are to prepare a quarter hin of wine as a drink offering. With a ram, you are to prepare a grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with a third of a hin of olive oil and a third of a hin of wine as a drink offering, a pleasing aroma to Jehovah. When you prepare a young bull as a burnt offering or a sacrifice to fulfill a vow, or as a peace offering to Jehovah, present with the bull a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with half a hin of olive oil. Also present half a hin of wine as a drink offering. It is an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to Jehovah. This is to be done for each bull, ram, lamb, or goat. This is how you must prepare each one, no matter how many. Everyone who is native born shall prepare these things in this way when he presents an offering made by fire as a pleasing aroma to Jehovah. And for the generations to come, if a foreigner residing with you or someone else among you wants to prepare an offering made by fire as a pleasing aroma to Jehovah, he is to do exactly as you do. The assembly is to have the same statute, both for you and the foreign resident. It is a permanent statute for the generations to come. You and the foreigner shall be the same before Jehovah. The same law and the same ordinance will apply to you, both you and the foreigner residing with you. Then Jehovah said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you enter the land to which I am bringing you, and you eat the food of the land, you shall lift up an offering to Jehovah from the first of your dough. You are to lift up a cake as a contribution. Offer it just like an offering from the threshing floor. Throughout your generations, you are to give Jehovah an offering from the first of your dough. Now, if you stray unintentionally and do not obey all these commandments that Jehovah has spoken to Moses, all that Jehovah has commanded you through Moses from the day that Jehovah gave them and continuing through the generations to come, and if it was done unintentionally without the knowledge of the congregation, then the whole congregation is to prepare one young bull as a burnt offering, a pleasing aroma to Jehovah, with its grain offering and drink offering according to the regulation, and one male goat as a sin offering. The priest is to make atonement for the whole congregation of Israel so that they may be forgiven. For the sin was unintentional, and they have brought to Jehovah an offering made by fire, and a sin offering presented before Jehovah for their unintentional sin. Then the whole congregation of Israel and the foreigners residing among them will be forgiven, since it happened to all the people unintentionally. Also, if one person sins unintentionally, he is to present a year-old female goat as a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement before Jehovah on behalf of the person who erred by sinning unintentionally. And when the atonement has been made for him, he will be forgiven. And you shall have the same law for the one who acts in error, whether he is a native-born Israelite or a foreigner residing among you. But the person who sins defiantly, whether a native or a foreigner, blasphemes Jehovah, that person shall be cut off from among his people. He shall certainly be cut off, because he has despised the word of Jehovah and broken his commandment. His guilt remains on him. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, a man was found gathering wood on the Sabbath day. Those who found the man gathering the wood brought him to Moses, Aaron, and the whole congregation, and because it had not been declared what should be done to him, they placed him in custody. And Jehovah said to Moses, the man must surely be put to death. The whole congregation is to stone him outside the camp. So the whole congregation took the man outside the camp and stoned him to death, as Jehovah commanded Moses. Later, Jehovah said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them that throughout their generations to come, they are to make for themselves tassels for the corners of their garments, with a blue cord on each tassel. These will serve as tassels for you to look at, so you may remember all the commandments of Jehovah, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourselves by following your own heart and your own eyes. Then you will remember and obey all my commandments, and you will be holy to your God. I am Jehovah your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Jehovah your God." There's a lot here. This is a reminder that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, specifically parts of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, are not necessarily in chronological order. That some of the narrative is pieced in, or maybe even better yet said, some of the laws that were given to Moses from the mouth of Jehovah were pieced in throughout the narrative where they fit, where they seemed applicable. There's no accident that these commandments about intentional and unintentional sin were right there, right before we hear this small narrative about the man gathering sticks on Shabbat. I have heard this story being debated for a long time, about how this is kind of proof that really Sabbath isn't so much of a blessing, right? That look, all this man was doing was gathering sticks and they were to stone him. And I just ask you to back up for a moment. Why do you think we just spent several paragraphs hearing about the same law for the foreigner and the native born, about unintentional and intentional sin? It had to apply to this situation here. So clearly, this was intentional, defiant sin, or else it would not have been placed right here, right? It would not have fit. It would have gone somewhere else with the Sabbath laws. This was defiance. So take away what was happening with sticks and Sabbath and focus on defiance. God is pointing out that there is a spirit of defiance in his people that he will root out. This unbelief, this lack of faith, this desire to believe our own ways, our own eyes, our own hearts, and not trust Jehovah's. This is prevalent in the people. And this is what this whole story, this whole Torah portion is talking about. Faith and belief, and how that equals your action or lack of action. And so this man, whatever, I've heard the debate of he's gathering sticks for work and he was going to use it to kindle a fire. So there's this whole debate of, can you have a fire to heat your home? Are you allowed to turn on a fire? Can we use a gas stove? Are we allowed to use heat? There's all these great debates throughout Judaism and Messianic believers about what can be done on Sabbath. Then you have like the other side of the coin of believers, where you have Christians who just believe none of it applies and it's all spiritual, and Yeshua is our rest, right? And there's this rest that we have, that none of these objective, real-time, obvious physical ways of rest, they don't apply. So really, you don't have to take a day off of work, or you can rest whenever you want to. I'm going to just ask us to throw both of those away. God rested. He set aside the seventh day. He told us to honor it the same. This man was defying the word of God. It's that simple. He was defiant. Moses went to God and said, "What do we do?" God told him. We don't like it. We don't like it when we see consequences that are quick and swift and with no room for debate. We often don't like it when we see that kind of justice take place, those kinds of consequences. This was an ancient people living in ancient times, and God was raising up a nation who was going to be the ones to bring Yehovah, his name, to the entire world. They had a really important job, and they agreed to it back at the mountain. They broke their covenant with the creator of the universe. And it's tough. It's tough to read through it. It's tough on our hearts. It's tough on me, my mother's heart, right? I want to explain and teach and give another chance and help my children grow into who they are, what their potential is. I want to help my children grow into their potential. But there's also a God who knows our potential. And people that he gave charge to, people that took the job, took the covenant seriously, the people he said, you will be my people and I will be your God. And they said, yes, we will do what you say. Those people needed to keep up their end of the covenant. So reading this little story about the sticks and the fire and Sabbath, kindling a fire and gathering the sticks, when you read it in this context of belief and obedience and defiance and intentional and unintentional sin, it really, I think it really gives more meaning, more depth to this few lines on the gathering of the sticks. Something else I want to just pause on for a minute in this section. Okay, how many times did this section say the same law for the native born and the foreigner? Several times here, right? I feel like this should end the debate of whether or not the commands of God apply to what many modern Christians call Gentiles. Does his law apply to the nations? No, if they want to remain the nations. If they want to come out of the nations and become part of the nation of biblical Israel, then yes, God's laws apply. It's confusing to me why that is confusing. This section spells it out several times, and it's like, okay, and if you're confused, I will restate. There is one law for the native born and the foreigner who attaches him or herself to Israel. Seems clear. And the fact that this command about the tassels or the tzitzit, these fringes that are to go on the garments, to remind ourselves and others who see them of the commandments, that's what they're there for, to remind us and those who live with us or near us, yes, I am part of a covenant people of God. And these strands with the blue strand woven through it, this is to remind me that I have agreed to believe my Redeemer, to believe the giver of salvation. And because I believe him, I'm going to act accordingly. And just so if you aren't aware, there are kind of two versions. I mean, there's lots of versions actually of tzitzit, these fringes. But you can see them either all in white or with blue thread in them. And I've seen many colors, but the idea is they're supposed to have a blue thread. That's what the command is. You'll see Orthodox Jews and probably other sects of Judaism not do the blue strand because apparently what we were supposed to use for this specific color blue, it's either an extinct animal or something that we don't have access to anymore. And so because they can't get the right color blue, they choose to not use any blue. It doesn't seem clear to just a superficial reading of this that God expected us to only use that one source of blue ink, blue dye. So you'll see many Messianics using the tzitzits that have the blue thread in it. So just so you know the difference. And yeah, our clothing is different now, right? People wore four-cornered clothing. They had a wrap, a garment that became their cloak, became their blanket at night. And we don't dress like that anymore. So there's many modern adaptations as to how we can fulfill this commandment with our modern clothing. And you'll see prayer shawls or undergarments that have places to attach tzitzit. You'll even see some people put them through their belt loops. I think the idea is not to judge other people and how they're trying to walk out this commandment, but to understand what these tassels represent, and they represent our commitment to following the commandments of Yehovah. And it's to help our neighbors, our people in our own community do the same, because sometimes it's hard to see your own, right? But when you're looking at other people, you can see theirs, and it can be a reminder. So a reminder to obedience. That's what these fringes are. And there's also a whole debate on whether women should be wearing them or they're just for men. And I'm not stepping into that. Yes, traditionally, I believe it was only men. I don't think our God has a problem with his daughters following his commandment here, right? Maybe it was more of a masculine garment that these went on the four corners of. I don't know. But what I do know is I have some. I have different ones around the house. I have a set sitting right here. There's the blue in it, but there's also purple and black. I have different colors. And so I've worn them on, I've buttoned them into sweaters. I've always got a cardigan. I put buttons on my sweaters so I could loop them in there. I've worn them sewed into skirts. And then there was periods of time where I just hadn't worn them, and I've kind of let this go. But reading this section again this time is really, it's reminding me that these are here to remind me of the importance of the commandments of Yehovah, and also to remind those who see me and see my clothing and know what this means. So I'm going to renew my commitment to wearing these at least some portion of every day. So, all right. So Joshua chapter 2 is our prophet pairing this week. Then Joshua, or Yahushua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim, saying, "Go inspect the land, especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. And it was reported to the king of Jericho, "Behold, some of the men of Israel have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab and said, "Bring the men out who came to you and entered your house, for they have come to spy the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. So she said, "Yes, the men did come to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when the gate was about to close, the men went out, and I do not know which way they went. Pursue them quickly, and you may catch them." But Rahab had taken them up to the roof and hidden them among the stalks of flax that she had laid out there. So the king's men set out in pursuit of the spies along the road to the fords of Jordan. As soon as they had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, Rahab went up to the roof and said to them, "I know that Jehovah has given you this land, and that the fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who dwell in the land are melting in fear of you. For we have heard how Jehovah dried up the waters of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites across the Jordan, whom you devoted to destruction. When we heard this, our hearts melted, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For Jehovah, your God, is God in the heavens above and the earth below. Now, therefore, please swear to me by Jehovah that you will indeed show kindness to my family because I showed kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother and brothers and sisters and all who belong to them, and that you will deliver us from death." "Our lives for your lives," the men agreed. "If you do not report our mission, we will show you kindness and faithfulness when Jehovah gives us this land." Then Rahab let them down by a rope through the window, since the house where she lived was built into the wall of the city. "Go to the hill country," she said, "so that your pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there for 3 days and remain until they have returned, then go on your way." The men said to her, "We will not be bound by this oath you made us swear unless, when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother and brothers and all your family into your house. If anyone goes out the door of your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head, and we will be innocent. But if a hand is laid on anyone with you in this house, his blood be on our heads. And if you report our mission, we will be released from this oath you made us swear." "Let it be as you say," she replied, and then she sent them away. And when they had gone, she tied the scarlet cord in the window. So the spies went out into the hill country and stayed there 3 days until their pursuers had returned without finding them, having searched all along the road. Then the two men started back, came down from the hill country and crossed the river. So they came to Joshua, son of Nun, and reported all that had happened to them. Jehovah has surely delivered the entire land into our hands, they said to Joshua. Indeed, all who dwell in the land are melting in fear of us. Such a fun story. It's exciting. It has all the parts to like a really good movie. Let's notice some things here, though. Joshua sent out spies again. Did God tell him to send the spies? This seems like this could be setting up the people for the same issue, right? The old generation has passed. This is Joshua. This is the first book after the Torah, right? We have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. This is in time chronologically after they have Moses has passed away, the baton has been passed to Joshua, Yehoshua, and they are supposed to be crossing over the Jordan. And here they're sending out spies. It goes differently though, but you'll see these spies wind up kind of borrowing the faith of Rahab. They're speaking like she spoke. They use the same language, melted courage, right? I find it interesting. Rahab, this prostitute, this woman who, by any means, any biblical means, is in sin. Likely in her culture, she is of a noble profession, because oftentimes prostitutes were related or connected to some kind of worship. It doesn't call her a temple prostitute, but even this act of going to someone for this interaction was seen as some way to glorify the idols, the pagan gods. But here she is helping these people who follow the one true God. And she knows, she even says, we know that Yehovah, your Elohim, is the Elohim of heaven and of earth. So she knows, and she professes the gospel truth. And then we have this beautiful symbol of salvation in her window, right? This red cord that's going to protect her and her whole family. We could talk more about the symbolic beauty of the red cord and the story of Rahab. Put your thoughts about it in the comments. I mean, the fact that her name doesn't show up again until we see the lineage of our Messiah, if you didn't know that, but Rahab comes up again in the lineage of Jesus, that she winds up being part of his family history, the family history of our Messiah. So if that's new to you, this idea of Rahab being in the genealogy of Jesus, go look in the genealogy verses in the beginning of Matthew. And she's also mentioned again in the book of Hebrews, and then also James, the book of James talks of her. So she is a matriarch. In the genealogy in Matthew, she is named as the mother of Boaz, and that she married a Salmon, who traditionally is said that he was one of those two spies. So this is a grandmother of David, King David, Solomon, and ultimately Yeshua, Jesus. Beautiful story of faith. And I do believe that her faith is what impacted the spies to come back and give that kind of report. Okay, here we are in Hebrews 3. Therefore, holy brothers who share in the heavenly calling, set your focus on Jesus, the apostle and high priest whom we confess. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. For Yeshua, Jesus, has been counted worthy of greater glory than Moses, just as the builder of a house has greater honor than the house itself. And every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. Now Moses was faithful as a servant in all God's house, testifying to what would be spoken later. But Christ is faithful as the son over God's house, and we are his house if we hold firmly to our confidence and hope of which we boast. Now, this quotes Psalm 95. Therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion, in the day of testing in the wilderness, where your fathers tested and tried me, and for 40 years saw my works. Therefore, I was angry with that generation. And I said, their hearts are always going astray, and they have not known my ways. So I swore on oath in my anger that they shall never enter my rest. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a wicked heart of unbelief that turns away from the living God, but exhort one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We have come to share in Christ if we hold firmly to the end the assurance we had at first. As it has been said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. For who are the ones who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those Moses led out of Egypt, and with whom God was angry for 40 years? Was it not those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that would never enter his rest? Was it not those who disobeyed? So we see that it was because of their unbelief that they were unable to enter. So this slide might seem a little out of place. This is Abraham and his son Isaac, and this test that we really talked about in great detail on when God called him to bring Isaac up to the mountain as a sacrifice. I think we got some insight that Abraham knew this was a test, but what do we see here? The obedience of Abraham to do what was called of him, even when he didn't understand, was that obedience was much more important than sacrifice, right? And we see that in, was it 1 Samuel 15? To obey is better than sacrifice. The act of obedience comes from belief. And I do want to just call out us Christians for a moment. How often do we get stuck on the idea of belief and faith? Believe in the name of Jesus, believe that he was raised from the dead, and that's all you need. Belief has to equal action. Belief has to equal obedience for it to count. Because it was unbelief that caused the disobedience and the lack of faith in this generation in the desert. It was a lack of belief that caused them to disobey. If we believe God is who he says he is, if we believe he is who he says he is, we will do what he asks us to do. It's really that simple. When we don't do it, it's because we don't believe in his power. It's because we don't believe that he can fulfill his promises. It's because we don't believe, oh, those things don't really apply to us. If we believed God and what he said, we would do the things he asked us to do, both big and small. So this is where we're going to end today. Thanks for joining me in this kind of meandering, these meandering thoughts about belief and obedience and our merciful God, who is also a God of justice. And I just want to leave you with this idea of being a generation who raises the ceiling so the next generation can have a firmer floor, and that we pass the baton on in a way that isn't full of shame and things we couldn't get to because our faith wasn't strong enough, but that we're able to pass on the legacy of our God, our creator, his beautiful kingdom, and the promise, the gospel of the kingdom come. So have a wonderful week. If you're new to this channel, please like this video, even if you're not new to the channel, like this video, follow the channel, share it if this has blessed you and you think it would be helpful for others. The more interaction I get on this page, the quicker it can grow and show up in algorithms. So we're still a little bit behind. We're kind of off sync with the week we should be on. We're getting caught up. So I will see you next time.